To Today in the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Damlola Ogunshaki, and I'm starting with Vanguard on the paper review. Vanguard major headline this morning says state governments now to share payment of electricity subsidy that's coming from federal government. We are reviewing situation. NGF, SEC, funding to come from PCAF that's coming from source. States should pay subsidy as active partners, CPPE says. Big fiscal political shift that's coming from Professor Iledare. Experts cast a doubt over federal government's power to make states pay electricity subsidies. You can see that story on page 5. Now on page 8, Makoko protest. Police used Aspire teargas on protesters. That's coming from FALANA. Malami challenges EFCC, asks court to set aside interim for feature other and property. You can see that story on page 6. And there's a photo story here beside that story. It says Matthew 50th birthday celebration in Warri. And other stories directly below the banner on page 11, ONITSHA Market Lockdown. 10,000 shops marked for demolition. We have open market, but nobody's coming to buy from us. That's coming from the traders. Market leaders hail traders. And the top left corner of the Vanguard newspaper, 2027, APC moves to exploit opposition's disunity. Prosecutor to London court, Desiane spent £140,000 on furniture, others. Outrage as Nigerian music superstars face disappointment again at 68 Grammy Awards. You can see that on page 7. And lastly, on Vanguard newspaper, Nigeria loses $77.7 billion to illicit financial flows in 10 years, and that's according to reports. Away from there, we move to The Guardian. The Guardian major headline says, Party politics by cut others ought into democracy opposition. You can see that on page 6. Court remands suspect of Benue killings in Kuje prison. NBA advocate time frame for resolving legal disputes. 2027 Saraki rejects APC overture to Fintiri as ruling party intensifies their recruitment. Nigeria paying every price for underfunding education sectors, says Oshibaju. You can see that on news page 7, 6, 3, and 9. Kuka. Nigerians must unite to end killings of Christians and Muslims. And top banner on news page 3, President directs MDAs to disclose electricity subsidy, pay bills. Court retains the NLC, TUC, others from strike and protest. Lastly, on the Guardian newspaper, I'll be running for president in 2027. Obi confirms. You can see that on news page 7 of the Guardian newspaper. Now let's move to the Punch. The Punch leading story says big money, small impact. Governors face fire over 9 trillion naira FAAC windfall. Federal allocations leap 37% post-subsidy. Spotlight on state spendings. NLC, economists, opposition parties react. You can see that on page 2. On page 41, refiners battle crude shortage as Nigeria exports 306 million barrels. Court remands 9 over killings of 150 in Benue. Ministry blames a budget delay as South Africa cuts embassy power supply. You can see that on page 46. No other country sees daily killings like Nigeria. That's coming from Kuka. You can see that on page 24. Top banner, PDP crisis. Wike block plans convention after court victory. Lastly, on the Punch newspaper, electoral out, Senate resumes debate today after backlash. You can see that on page 46. And lastly, the Nation major headline this morning says, history impart as Governor Buni inaugurates a world-class scientific research training center in Yobe. Electricity subsidy payment, federal government to share cost with state and council. You can see that on news page 4. And the top banner, Wike comes fixes a PDP convention for March 28th. Uzodinma Buni Akonde, 70 others in APC convention panel. Lastly, on the Nation newspaper, Malami lists income sources to prevent asset forfeiture. You can see that on page 4. And that's all we have on the front pages of the dailies. Join us after the break as our guest will be in the studio to analyze some of the stories. Welcome back. If you're just joining me, this is Today in the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Damilola Ogunshaki, and joining me to analyze some of the stories on the fan pages this morning is Mr. Dayo Akitobi, publisher of Daily Page Today, Lekki Today, and Ikeja GRA Today. Good morning, Mr. Dayo.
Good morning, Damilola. Good morning, all of viewers.
All right, let's first talk about electricity in Nigeria. And electricity in Nigeria now, it seems when it comes to the affordability, there's a new change, a big change in the affordability support. It's being funded. The federal government, they announced a new framework in which the state government will now, bear part of the cost of electricity subsidy alongside the federal government. What do you think about this? Is this going to make electricity more affordable for Nigerians?
Well, in terms of affordability, I don't even think that's the real issue. I think the real issue is supply. Can we even get electricity in the first place? Can we have electricity? I'm sure that if people have electricity, uninterrupted power supply, I'm sure they'll be happy to pay for it because, if we have uninterrupted power supply, manufacturers, industries, they will employ people because they can expand capacity. People have jobs, they have money in their pocket, they'll be able to pay for electricity. So let's address supply before affordability. Supply is still nothing to write home about. We are still generating very low in terms of how much megawatts we're generating, still not enough for the country. But what the federal government has done, basically, to try and improve power supply, is to divest some of the central structure of the whole power sector from generation to transmission to distribution. What they've essentially done is removed electricity, the power sector, from the exclusive list, which exclusive list is the thing that only the federal government can do. Things like military, national security, foreign relations, things like that. Those are what are on the exclusive list that only the federal government can do. Customs and excise, immigration issues, things like that. So there's a concurrent list in the constitution that are things that both the federal and the state can do. So they move power from the exclusive list to the concurrent list, meaning that states cannot take charge of their power infrastructure, of their power supply, of the whole power sector. And about, I think 16 states have done so far, whereby they've set up a regulatory commission within their own state that now oversees the power sector locally. However, it's still the federal government that owns the infrastructure and that deals with the bulk supply, the generation from Kainji, from Egbe, from all that. When they say national grid, that national grid is controlled by the federal government. But what the federal government is saying is that within each individual state, you can set up your own power plants, you can set up your own generation, your own transmission, and you can regulate the sector. So now, all of the distribution companies, they are all in difficulty. Even though I read somewhere today that federal government has offset its debt to all the power components, whether generation, transmission, distribution, that several billion that has accumulated over the years, they've paid it. But all of the power entities are struggling. And so they've come up with something called a cost reflective tariff. What does that mean? Cost reflective tariff means it takes them so much money, or there's a cost associated with them generating, transmitting, and distributing the power till it gets to the end user, which is you and me. That there's a cost associated with doing that. And that if they were to take the cost of what is costing them, right, to generate 1 kilowatt, and they divide by all of us who are using the power, then what it will cost us. Sure, we are still complaining about band is high. If they were to charge us the true cost plus small profit, if they, of course, because every business is, power is now a private entity, so they have to make profit. They borrowed money, they have investors, they have to give returns. Do you understand? So by the time they put the cost of what it takes from generation till it gets to the end user, if they compute the cost, add small profit, let's say 5% on top, then divide it among all of the consumption, and what it will cost per 1 kilowatt hour, nobody in Nigeria can afford it. Nobody, not even the rich, nobody can afford it. So what has been happening all along is that government has been subsidizing it. That's why they owe them so much money. So if they generate, let's say, for example, 5,000 megawatts a day for the next 1 year, that total comes to this much. But what they collect from us is a fraction. So it's government that's been meeting the difference. So here's what has happened. This thing you talked about now is that government is saying, look, since we have passed on the responsibility to the states to control their own electricity sector. This subsidy that we are paying to enable you and me to be able to afford electricity, that the states should bear some part of it too. Why should it be only the federal government? Because right now, politically, the states have an advantage to be able to say, oh, we are regulating electricity and helping you get more. We are making sure it's affordable for you. All of the advantages that go with power supply, the states are able to claim benefit. So federal government say, first of all, we can't continue to afford it, especially when we've divested it to the states. So the states should bear a part of that responsibility. Of course, the states are up in arms and they're saying, well, first of all, what's the sharing formula? The subsidy, how do we determine how much the state pays, how much the federal? So there are issues with it. But what the government basically is saying, like, look, the most vulnerable in society, those who can least afford it, we've been subsidizing for them all along. And okay, so those who can afford it, let them pay. But those who can't afford it, rather than for them to go without electricity, federal government has been making sure they get electricity. That's in spite of the sporadic supply. Federal government is still making sure that at least the little bit that the vulnerable get, federal government makes sure they get it at an affordable rate, what they can afford to pay. So that difference between the cost of the whole value chain, the cost, and what the end user is paying, that difference that government is making up is called a subsidy. So federal government is now saying that states, since you now have responsibility for your power sector, you have to pay part of that subsidy in order to keep the price affordable for the vulnerable. So that's what this whole thing is all about.
Well, you talked about this, the poorer states. How can they show that this subsidy
especially the poorer states? I mean, already they're having problem paying minimum wage and all that. So you look at it and you ask yourself, where would they get the money from? What possibility is that the federal government can take it straight out of their FACO, their monthly allocation? They can remove it at source before they give them the balance. I don't know if the federal government has the constitutional power to do that. I don't think the federal government can impose on any state how to spend this money. Because what this is basically is that the federal government is forcing the states. It's not leaving it voluntary or optional. It's forcing them and saying, by force, you have to do this. Suppose some states are not interested. It's not every state, even though you've given me the power to regulate my sector, it's not every state that's going to do it. And even those who do it, it's not every state that has the wherewithal financially to be able to shoulder that subsidy, you know? So they would rather the federal government continue to pay it. But what for me matters most is that reform in the power sector is necessary. And I think this is part of the reform. And I think what the government is trying to do here, the federal government, is to make sure that prices don't go up and that power continues to remain affordable, especially for those who can least afford it. But there's also an issue to do with the supply side, you know, that requires investment. And when you divest this to the states to do, how many of them can afford? I mean, I think there's a state in the southeast that Geometric Power, former power of Minister Bath Naji, set up a power plant. I think it was in Imo or one of those states. And that power generating plant was supposed to be able to power several thousand homes and cover a wide area, I think within either Imo or Abia State. I can't remember very well. But how many states have the financial wherewithal to be able to build their own power plants, you know? So a lot still devolves back to the federal government, at least in terms of making the power available. Then how you now work out the mathematics of how to keep the price low, which is the federal government's concern, is how do we keep the price low? I think there should be equal attention paid to how do we provide more. I think if there's more power provided, economies of scale will kick in and prices will drop naturally. If competition, you know, you can't have, privatization was supposed to breed competition, but up till now, they have dedicated territories. Ikeja Electric has its own area. You know, Eco Electric has its own area. Abuja Electric has its own area. No competitor can come in and set up parallel operations within those areas. They're dedicated territories. So there's no real competition as such. But if there's competition and more investment and supply is plentiful, prices will naturally drop, which is what the federal government is trying to do, is to keep the price, is price protection for the most vulnerable, which is part of government's role, is to look after your vulnerable. So I don't blame the government for trying to find a way. And they are basically saying, look, we're in partnership with the states on this power thing now. Whereas before, it used to be all the federal government. But now that the state has part responsibility, federal government say, let's share this money to ensure that the price stays low. That's all. But of course, you would expect they're receiving resistance from not just the states, but from other stakeholders as well.
You mentioned earlier that there are concerns about how the money will be distributed, how the contributions will be support. So, do you think these contributions, do you think should be calculated based on how the states consume, like their consumption rates or the population? How best do you think they can share this?
You see, it's a problem because there are some states that consume a lot more, but have less money to pay. The fact that you consume doesn't make you a wealthy state. Do you understand? I mean, so the sharing formula is going to be tricky. Do we say government, federal should pay 80%, you pay 20%? Should it be based on population? Should it be based on consumption? Should it be based on what the state can afford to pay? So this is the tricky thing is I'm not sure how well thought out a policy it was. We need to wait and see for the proper policy to be fleshed out and come out. For now, this is still a proposal. It hasn't been codified into a policy statement because if it were, it would state specific criteria. We don't know the criteria or the formula which will be applied. Like you said, in some cases it will be unfair to some states because some states will consume more and pay less because either they can afford less or because they have fewer poor people or more poor people. Look at it this way. There are some poor states that have a lot of poor people. And there are some rich states that have few poor people. Because remember, this subsidy is supposed to be to protect the most vulnerable. First of all, what criteria do you use to measure the most vulnerable? Is it the social register that we used to give conditional cash transfer? How do you determine the most vulnerable? But when you do, how does that equate to equity and fairness across the board? Because you have disparate levels of prosperity across the states. So there could be very populous states that are poor. There are many vulnerable people. And consumption is high, but they have low revenue, low money to pay. So in that case, how do you compute the formula? So that's why I say it's not a complete policy yet. They've just flown this kite to say this is what we're thinking of doing, and the states will have to pay. We have to wait and see the policy statement that's fully fleshed out before we can begin to criticize or praise and say this is how it works. But equity, fairness, and justice is important so that some states don't get short shrift while some others get advantage. It's important.
Yeah, for some time, it took some states a long time to start paying the minimum wage. Some it took years for the state.
Some are still not paying
the minimum wage. So what will happen if some states refuse to pay their own share in this electricity?
Well, the federal government can't force them, although they have the power to hold their allocation, to withhold part of their allocation, because it's the federal government every month that gives the states money from Abuja through FAC. So they can withhold the amount and then distribute the balance. But I would assume that any state that happens to will go to court to challenge the government's right to withhold part of its money for something that the state is not interested in doing. Like I said, you can't force a state as to how he's going to spend his money. It's his business. The federal government's own this is your share of this month's allocation, come and collect your money. So it's got to be voluntary. Do you understand what I'm saying? It can't be compelled. The states that want to participate can participate voluntarily. And in that case, it will be because of the love of their people, that the most vulnerable. Let's continue to make sure they can get affordable power, because power is not a luxury. Power is critical to the sustenance of life. It's critical to the sustenance of employment, critical to the sustenance of development. So power should be seen as an essential good, not a luxury. Do you understand? So for that reason, government should bend over backwards to make sure that it's not just only available, but it's affordable to all of their people. So states who have the love of their people at heart will find a way to arrange the money, cut cost of governance, sacrifice some other things, cut some things here, cut some things there. See, government is over bloated at all levels. That's the truth. You have people with 10, 12, 15 PAs, convoys of cars of 36 jeeps, and all kinds of wastages, leakages, outright theft. If we were able to really reduce the size of government and curb corruption, I'm sure many states will have a lot more money available that they can utilize for the betterment of their people, including this electricity issue.
All right, away from electricity, let's talk about Anambra State. And for some time now, Governor Soludo and the IPOP seat at home, Governor Soludo has stopped trying to stop this IPOP Monday seat at home. And recently, Governor Soludo has directed that 10,000 shops be marked for demolition in ONITSHA Market. So, what do you think about this table? Because he said it's in order to decongest the market, but some people are against this idea. What do you think about it?
The first thing that boggled my mind when I heard that story is 10,000 shops in one place. In one place. And that's just those to be demolished too.
Yes.
So imagine if 10,000 are to be demolished. Imagine how many are actually in that market. And here is the largest market in.
I've been to the market
you have.
For a long. Yeah, I went there for, I think, because my school is around, it was around that side too. It's a very big shop.
I would love to go there one day.
10,000 market.
I would love to go.
It's not small.
Yeah, I would love to go there and visit one day, because that was the thing. I said 10,000 to be demolished. So how many are there total? There must be 40, 50,000 if 10,000 are going to be demolished. Anyway, to go back to focus on the story itself. The main thing that happened was Governor Soludo wanted to end this Monday sit at home thing, because of the adverse effects it was having on his economy, or the economy of Anambra State, and the fact that even Nnamdi Kanu and IPOB have disavowed, have distanced themselves from this Monday sit at home. But, out of fear, a lot of traders, I hear even banks don't open on Mondays in Anambra. And, traders, shoppers, nobody out of fear. But you look at it, it's an obsolete policy, because even the IPOB who initially announced it, they've disavowed the policy. So, and it continues to be a drain on the resources of the state, because for that one day, billions is lost in revenue in terms of what would exchange hands between buyers and sellers. So it has become, even if it was to make a political point, it has become an economic nightmare for the state. And Governor Soludo said enough is enough. So he went to the market, threatened them that if next Monday they don't open, the following Monday, he would demolish the shops of those who don't open. So of course, the traders went on a protest. They went on the street, they went to protest that, look, even if you want sit at home on Monday to stop, have you taken the steps in terms of security? Because who will be the victims? Anybody who opens their shop, these people will come and victimize them. Where will you, Governor Soludo, be at the time when those bad people are coming to us to come and threaten, kill, beat, maim, destroy their goods? Where will you be then? Then there's the other side of the coin, that the shoppers, even if I come and I open my shop, the shoppers are too afraid to leave their house on Monday. So I'm opening my shop and no, there's nobody to. So Governor Soludo, you're putting the cart before the horse. That was their response to him. That what you should do, go and secure our state first and make sure that we can open our shop safely and the shoppers can come safely. Have you done that before you now come and say we must open on Monday by force? We are still afraid. We don't have the confidence that you and the federal government have done what it takes to keep us safe and secure on Mondays if we were to come out and transact business. So Governor Soludo now decided to lead by example. He actually went to ONITSHA Market yesterday, Monday. He encouraged shop owners to open. Went there and did shopping himself and said, see, nothing will happen. I promise you, nothing will happen. Keep this place open. So the 10,000 shops he demolished, first of all, of course, it arose from his threat that those who don't open on Monday, he will take their shops from them. So that was where this thing started initially. So they marked the shops that didn't open. I don't know if it was yesterday's Monday or the previous Monday, they marked them. Then, once they had resolved that issue, the next issue became, okay, so the market is too congested. So the ones we have marked before that are still open, let's use the opportunity to get rid of them and reduce the congestion in the market. But at the end of the day, more than it's not galvanized by the environmental concerns. It's more about the political aspect of this Monday sit at home. And I think the step he took yesterday to show, to lead by example and show that, nothing untoward will happen to anyone. I think it has inspired confidence, because the market was open yesterday and a lot of shops did open and they did do their trade. And many people came out. I saw the pictures on TV during the news. Crowds and crowds and crowds of shoppers who are happy to be able to come. And of course, the governor is there leading the way, So it turned out into a political rally of sorts. But bottom line is that there was some level of normalcy restored in ONITSHA Market yesterday, and let's hope that a follow-up continues on both sides, that both the government will continue to do what it needs to do to ensure the people are safe and secure, and that the people themselves will begin to try and return to a life of normalcy on Mondays in Anambra.
For these 10,000 shops marked for demolition, don't you think that is overly aggressive, or do you think it will worsen the traders' plight with what is going on?
Well, there's always a price to pay for demolition. I mean, for development. And, I've seen it happen even here in Lagos in different markets where, they've relocated or dislocated people, both even residential and commercial. And invariably, there will always be some people who will pay a price and who will be hurt by such action, right? The part I worry about is that when these kind of things happen generally, it's usually the rich and the elite that benefit, because by the time they rebuild the shops or they drive the ordinary trader out, saying, oh, the place is too congested, and they want to rebuild it and make it more modern, put in infrastructure, put in modern shops. Instead, many of the shops there may be shacks or containers or, temporary structures. So they eliminate them and say, we want to rebuild this place and make it more modern. By the time they rebuild it and make it more modern, make it more environmentally friendly, do sewage treatment plant, underground gutters, underground lights, electricity stuff, make it modern. You'll find that the average trader is priced out of the rental markets. They can't afford it. I saw it happen in many markets here in Lagos that they drove the ordinary people out, said, we want to redevelop. And by the time they finish redeveloping, the ordinary person couldn't afford to rent back there. So that's what I pray doesn't happen in Anambra, is that if he does go ahead and demolish the 10,000, it's either because he wants to create more space. I'm sure they won't leave that space lying fallow. Something is going to come in there. And what comes in there should, of necessity, of fairness, be given first right of refusal to those who were dislocated. Although then there's the legal issue that the 10,000 shops, the people occupying them, do they have valid leases? Are they up to date on their rent? Are they in default of even maybe just sanitation fees and market fees? So it's not as simple and straightforward as him saying, I'm going to just demolish 10,000 and drive all the people out. And let's see how it goes. We wish them well in Anambra.
All right, let's compare to Lagos. And human rights lawyer FALANA, he has accused police operative of using expired tear gas canisters on protesters during the demonstration against demolition and forced evictions in Makoko. What do you think about these alarming allegations of this expired tear gas being used?
Well, again, I was surprised to know that tear gas expires. It's not food, It's not like when you buy in the supermarket that has expiration. So I'm surprised that they say it expires. But, that shows administrative lapses in terms of the law enforcement sector, because they have a chain of command. I know, for example, that each divisional police station has an armory. And why I know is because the armorer in the divisional police station in my area several years ago was my friend. So each one has an armory where they keep their weapons, things like tear gas, things like batons, rifles, walkie-talkies, and they're supposed to be accountable. They're supposed to be... So I would imagine that the armorer in the armory is supposed to be keeping track of things like expiry dates, except that you don't really think that things like bullets and tear gas canisters would have expired. So I wonder how Mr. Falana got to find out. Did he pick up a tear gas canister? When they fired it, did the shell fall on the floor? I mean, I don't know the science of, armament. So I won't know if when you fire a canister of tear gas, whether the canister falls off after it's been expended and it can be picked on the ground by anybody. I don't know. But I'm curious as to how did he find out that they were expired. But the truth be told is that when it comes to protests and things like strikes, police are there to protect the protesters, not to victimize them. The first role of the police, because remember, it's a constitutional right to protest for anything. So the people in Makoko have a right to protest because they feel like government wasn't fair to them. So they have a right to air their grievances. And that's what they were doing. And from my understanding, it was a peaceful protest. Of course, government did not want them to protest. Police told them not to protest. What is their constitutional right? And I'm not sure any court told them not to do it. So at that point, police's role should have been to protect them. Without a doubt, when there's a huge crowd, especially people who are agitated about something, they are aggrieved, their whole livelihoods have been upended, their property, their homes, their livelihood, their life has been scattered. So they are in pain now. So when you have several hundreds of people in a small space who are in pain and who are agitated, without a doubt, tempers will flare. Without a doubt, somebody will mistakenly step on somebody's toe. They'll be jostling, they'll be pushing. Some people may fall, So police has a greater responsibility, a greater duty of care. Not because they see some people pushing each other or maybe even some miscreants try and mix in and try and hijack. It doesn't mean that they should just all of a sudden open season on all the protesters and just go ballistic and start firing willy-nilly. Police have got to exercise a lot of caution and patience, a lot more than normal, because it's not normal circumstances when we are protesting. We are in pain, and there's no way. Our nerves are raw. I don't have a home to sleep in tonight. Where I've lived for most of my adult life was obliterated overnight. I lost most of my property. I don't know where my children are. My neighbors have disappeared. My whole life, I can't see tomorrow. Then you think I can be calm and friendly and hospitable. No, I'm agitated. So it's for you to be patient with me and calm me down. I say everything's going to be all right. Give me a pat on the back. I say, don't worry, cousin, you'll be fine. Government will sort you out. That's the role police should have been playing. Big brother, giving succor. And as the role they should always play in every strike, but it doesn't work that way because they see a little skirmish. Skirmishes will be expected in a mass crowd. They see a little skirmish, the next thing they are trigger happy, boom, 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 boom. This issue of expired tear gas, should they be using expired tear gas? Like I said, I don't know the mechanics or the science of armament, but anything expired, I know it's not good for human consumption. But tear gas is not for human consumption anyway. So it's not a good story, but the moral of the story for me is that they shouldn't be so quick. Although they might make a case, so I haven't heard the police's side though, but they might make a case for why they had to disperse tear gas, use tear gas to disperse the crowd. But for me, they need to be a little more patient, a little more cautious in these situations of protests.
All right, our time is fast spent, so let's just end this on a lighter note to Mr. and Mrs. And the first person speaking is Mrs. Mrs. says 40th birthday by making his wife the sole owner of all his properties. That's what I call angel at 40. Mr. replied, and I call him a fool at 40.
And a fool at 40 is a fool forever. Yeah, I can understand why Mr. is thinking that way.
Mrs. Jolly loves that. She's just telling Mr. This is a sign for you to also.
So do the same thing. Yeah, next Mr. will say, well, I'm over 40 anyway, so it doesn't matter.
All right, thank you, sir, for joining us.
My pleasure always.
And that's Mr. Dayo Akintobi, publisher of Video Today, Lekki Today, and Ikeja GRA Today. He just reviewed and analyzed some of the stories with us this morning, and this is where we have to draw the curtain. Do what to like and follow us on all our social media platforms showing on your screen. You can also visit our website, www.vanguardngr.com. Have a lovely Tuesday. My name is Damlola Ogushake.